Do you know that feeling when you're with your partner or someone you're dating and you feel constricted and too close? Your mind wants nothing more than freedom, and to get it, you want to get away, be alone, and be not too attached to that person. But you don't actually want to end the relationship. You want closeness, but then it's too much for you. You want to be with the person, but at the same time, you have a bad feeling about the commitment. Now today, your eyes will be open when you finally understand what's actually behind that fear of commitment. You will also understand which role complex childhood trauma plays in your relationship anxiety, and you will learn what you can do to finally break free from your avoidant attachment style. I wish someone would have recorded such an episode for myself already 10 years ago, because to understand the connections between the fear of commitment and complex trauma, that was one piece of the puzzle that I needed to finally start to resolve the bad feelings I've had for so long in my relationships. Welcome to today's episode. My name is Robert, and today we talk about the fear of commitment, which I think is one of the most important topics many people out there deal today. And a disclaimer up front, I'm not a health professional, and the content in this video are not to be understood as therapeutic medical instructions or advice. Everything I say here is based on research, my work with therapists, or personal experience. And also, I have created a free workbook for you to help you to understand and re-regulate those symptoms of complex trauma, of fear of commitment. And you can just download it on understandable-podcast.com. The workbook shows you the best writing techniques to clear your mind, the best grounding skills and tools to re-regulate your nervous system, and the method to reconnect with yourself and others using the emotion wheel. It is also important to mention that those techniques are definitely helpful to resolve a fear of commitment, since I can remember myself dating or being in a relationship. One fear was a constant companion for myself, the fear of commitment. Not just that I don't like relationships or that I don't like people or something like that. It's just that I sometimes experience intimate relationships as too much, too close, or too overwhelming. I then feel at the mercy of others and I feel constricted. And then I have to withdraw in order to feel relieved and feel free again. Now you could say, you're just not with the right partner. But I've already had 5 various relationships with 5 very different partners. I ended up quitting all 5 of them myself, and the length of my relationships decreased as well over time. And so my therapist told me, that's definitely a pattern there, Robert. And maybe you, as you watch or listen now, can identify with the exact same problem here. Now, the obvious pattern behind that relationship style is driven by a fear of commitment and by relationship anxiety, also described as an avoidant attachment style. But what is that? A fear of commitment? I think the term is definitely highly misused and is definitely also misleading, because is it really a fear of commitment to another person or to something? Let's look at the definition of what a fear of commitment is described as. And a fear of commitment, when we read a definition here, also known as gamophobia, is the irrational fear or avoidance of long-term partnership or marriage. The term is sometimes used interchangeably with commitment phobia, which describes a generalized fear or avoidance of commitment more broadly. In essence, despite deriving satisfaction from companionship in their relationships, many people choose to distance themselves and withdraw if relationships progresses to a serious level of commitment. Now, I get the point that it's described as irrational here, but I don't think it actually is. It doesn't make sense to be afraid of closeness because usually you don't die from being with a loved one, but that maybe wasn't the case for you for the whole life. And that thought already points to our childhood. If you are having a fear of intimacy or a fear of relationships, it's definitely not that you don't like relationships or that you don't love the other person. But that is often what people think at first, and then they quit the relationship. Maybe you also had that thought before when you're with someone and you think, why does it feel so uncomfortable with that person? But at the same time, I really like the person and it doesn't make sense that I feel that. Because when you feel that bad gut feeling, when you have this uncomfortable sensation in your body, then the conclusion for your probably logical thinking brain is often, it's not the right person. I'm with the wrong person. People then often feel extremely confused by all these different sensations and also feel like they're torn apart in a way. I want to bring up another metaphor here. So I want you to image relationships and the fear of commitment as a salad. Yes, you've heard that right. Imagine relationships and relationship phobia as a salad. A large salad with a ton of ingredients. You may have tomatoes, goat cheese, cucumber, pepper, apple, maybe dates, onions, vinegar, olive oil in there. Whatever you like to be in a salad. Maybe there are also things that I mentioned now that you don't like. So it's not that you don't like the salad. No. Probably you really love salad. Maybe you're not. Then that's a really bad example. Maybe you're just a psychopath then. Or a salad hater, whatever. But imagine you like the salad. You really love salad in general. The point is, one or two of these ingredients give you stomach pain. And the next problem is you have absolutely no idea which one it is. Or maybe there are more than one. Now that is a good image for a comparison with the fear of commitment, because it's not probably that you don't like relationships, it's not that you don't love the person, but there is an ingredient within that relationship with that person that gives you stomach pain. Relationships in general are definitely a beautiful thing, and many people, also people who have a fear of commitment, often have an intense phase of infatuation in the beginning of a relationship. So there is definitely affection and attraction for another person. But after a while, it somehow just kind of disappears for some people, especially if you have this relationship phobia. And instead of that glamorous feeling of being attracted to each other, of having butterflies in your tummy, there are feelings now of resentment, anxiety, numbness. There are dysregulated states happening for you. You have weird sensations in your body, pain in your stomach, there is pressure in your chest, in your throat, you feel somehow cold towards the other person, you feel distance, you feel empty. And you feel that you just don't want to spend time with that person right now because the person feels somehow too close to you. Now, this morning when I walked home, I thought about how I will approach today's episode, and then this image here came to my mind. I show you two different graphics here. If you watch this as a video, you can see that now. Now, in the infatuation phase, everything is pink, everything is full of love, there is attraction, there is connection, there is sexual energy, everything is just amazing, everything is through pink glasses, butterflies in your tummy. But then, after a while, the fear of commitment phase comes for avoidant attaches here. And this looks like a huge pile of poop or a dark cloud that covers up all the beautiful feelings of love and attraction and just dumps it down. And this pile of poop is full of distraction, is full of the need to be alone, is full of fear, is full of dysregulation and resentments. And it pushes down all this beautiful infatuation energy, all the love. If you have this already after a couple weeks or months with a person, that's another topic. But all the beautiful feelings, attraction, the feeling of being in love, all those kind of things were pushed down. It should be noted that the fear of commitment is a phase. This is why I'm titling this here as the fear of commitment phase that happens from time to time. And especially if you work on it, the symptoms don't last the whole time. Very importantly as well, the poop here in that image, or the cloud, masks the loving feelings, but it does not erase them. The beautiful sensations are buried under that pile of poop here. Love and attraction are still there if they were there at the beginning. Again, they're just buried now, and you can dig them out again. And I will show you how to do that in this episode. Before we get to the explanations, what's actually happening there and how you can resolve it, it's really important to listen to these bad sensations, because those bad ingredients that give you stomach pain in your relationship, they definitely have a meaning. They are not there just because, I don't know, the universe sent them to you. They're signals of your body. And it's important now for you at first to understand what this disgust response is telling you. Now, when you feel that cloud in front of all of your loving sensations, you should definitely try and listen what this cloud, what these sensations are actually telling you, because they're really, really worthy information for you. Now, I want you to imagine that you're laying in bed with your partner now, and he or she is looking at you with the wide, enamored eyes here, all like, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. Maybe he's also telling that to you. But you feel that you can't say that back in that moment. You flinch and feel somehow even disgust. It's too much for you. And this happens to so many people. You're not alone with it. You don't have to be ashamed to have these sensations. It's completely normal. Even if you don't want to talk about it, or even if many people don't talk about it, I want to make clear it's a normal reaction at first. And you will see why in a bit. Now, what most people do in those situations, maybe also you, and I did that so many times, you feel ashamed, you feel guilty for having these emotions, and you might hide or mask them. But it is much more important here to listen carefully now. You don't have to share them in that situation to your partner or to the person you're with, but it's important to recognize them for you at first and to make them really clear for you. What does the feeling of disgust really tell you right now? Why do you feel this discomfort? Are you perhaps reminded to a situation in your childhood, to different other situations with people you just dated? Or do you think that your partner is imposing a lot of expectations on you and that you have to meet them? Or are you afraid of not being able to be yourself in the relationship and that you have to play being in love, for example? Now, to find out more about this, let's take a look at the connection with childhood and early traumatic experiences here. One thing you have to understand is that the fear and symptoms related to the fear of commitment here are actually not an illusion. We don't talk about an elusive and irrational fear. So the first thing you should do is stop lying to yourself if you do so. Don't tell yourself something like, oh, I don't have these sensations, there is something wrong with me, or I should ignore these sensations. Those sensations are bad. Those sensations are not real. Stop that. Be more compassionate with yourself instead. Those sensations are there with you. It's totally fine. They're with many people. And it's a good thing that your body sends you those signals. So listen to them. Your body is always on your side. Now, to understand the true reason why you have these sensations, we will now get to the core of it. So listen to this following probably eye-opening possibility. It is often not necessarily the other person or the relationship with the other person you're afraid of. It's the version of yourself when you are with that other person or in that relationship that you're afraid of. What do I mean by that? In the previous episodes about complex trauma, we've often talked about how an abusive and toxic family system influences the relationships and behaviors later in adult life. And I want to quickly recap that now. Now, as a reminder, in toxic family systems, children experience emotional and physical neglect and abuse in various ways. For example, comparison, where you're not like your sister, parentification, when your parents give you that feeling that you have to take care of them and they don't take care of you, oppression, you don't deserve to be seen for who you are, or your needs are bad, you shouldn't have needs at all, manipulation, you as a child have to rescue us parents, emotional abuse, you're a burden. Now, in those toxic family systems, you often have emotional abusive caregivers. You have alcoholism and drug addiction involved. Maybe there is narcissism or there are narcissistic traits involved in at least one of the caregivers. Or one of the caregivers is someone with strong, uncontrollable emotional outbursts. Those are examples for I would say toxic caregivers within those labeled toxic family systems now. And what happens to children in their adulthood to experience such abusive family systems or caregivers? We've had these graphics here in the other episode, and I want to just explain you what happens then if you experience such a childhood or if you had to deal with such a toxic caregiver. Now, that creates later in life a wounded pathway, and you will see what that means for your fear of commitment in a bit. When you experience a certain emotion and you have or had to deal with that emotion when you were younger, for example, when your caregiver denied that emotion, when you were not able to express that emotion, when you had to play a role when you're a child, when you had that emotion, because your emotion, for example, was not recognized, then a stimuli, for example, you have the sensation of grief, or you experience someone who screams at you, who is angry at you, who criticizes you as an adult now, then this stimulus triggers a response in you. A traumatized individual who experienced a toxic and abusive home and family system then feels disconnected anytime he or she gets reminded to a situation from the past. Again, you feel grief, but you were not allowed to show grief when you were a child. You want something and your parents said it's bad that you want that thing. You do something, you get criticized, people insulted you, your caregiver screamed at you. Then you have the same situation in the present as an adult. You constantly get reminded to that. Every time something reminds you to that horrible childhood or to those experiences from the past that hurt you so much, you get a trigger situation in the here and now. Anytime you have this trigger situation, you will feel disconnected from yourself. How does a disconnect show up? You feel unsafe and dysregulated, and many people don't understand that they feel unsafe and dysregulated because it's such a difficult sensation to grab. But they unconsciously do that. They unconsciously feel insecure, they feel unsafe, and they feel dysregulated because they are in a reactive trauma response. Now you have these emotions, again, that instead of feeling those loving and beautiful and attracting sensations, you will feel anxiety, you will feel fear, you will feel anger and grief, because that's your trauma response. That's the signs that your body will send you, and even more. Maybe you will start to deny those sensations now. I don't feel that. I don't feel anxiety. I don't feel fear. And you will feel toxic shame and guilt because you feel guilty that you just can't say to your partner, I feel in love too. I feel close to you too. No, because you want to run away, because you want to protect yourself. It feels too close. There's too much intimacy. Your body will send you signals now. You will experience masking and hiding these emotions. Those emotions are not real. It's an illusion. You might experience dissociation, cut yourself off from your sensations. You might have an altered attention. You feel like you're in a tunnel. You might avoid relationships completely. You might have pressure in your chest, in your throat. You might have weird feelings in your gut. You might feel hypervigilant within your relationship, that you have to be hyper alert constantly. You might re-experience traumatic situations from the past. And then you might also just quit your relationship because you just feel so overwhelmed by it. We talked about that whole picture, that whole wounded pathway more in depth in the episode highly sensitive person and complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And we've also talked about it in the episode of the cycle of toxic shame. I will both episodes put in the description below. Now, after hearing this, you might have a better understanding of the fear of commitment or an avoidant attachment style, and that those things are just symptoms of a disconnect from oneself that causes then feelings of toxic shame and guilt, that causes sensations of disconnect, of anxiety, of emptiness, and that makes you also hide specific parts of yourself. And what happens if you hide specific parts of yourself? You will, and I guarantee that to you, feel exhausted. You will feel inauthentic. You will feel like you can't be yourself in that relationship. And to find out if that's also true for you, you can simply ask yourself the following question: in which areas of your relationship you are not authentically showing up? Or in other words, which parts of yourself am I hiding in my relationship? We will finally talk about solutions next, but before, I want to make one another extremely important connection here. And that's the connection between the role of the central nervous system within your trauma reaction or within your dysregulated states while having phases of fear of commitment. Now, what happens on the level of the central nervous system here when a trauma response happens? Dr. Peter Levine says that trauma is stored within the body, to be accurate, within our nervous system. Now, there is this model of the 3 states of the central nervous system, and according to the idea of the polyvagal theory, which we will have fully discussed in this episode about the PVT, we have those 3 states here. When you are in a really relaxed and calm state, you are usually in the ventral vagal social engagement state. And there you feel joy, there you feel mindful, you feel a lot of compassion. Then we have the second state, that is the sympathetic fight or flight state. It's when you feel rage, anger, panic, those things going on. And then we have the dorsal vagal freeze state. And this is usually the state where we feel dissociation, where we feel disconnected. There is shame, there is shutdown, there is hopelessness. Now, in the fear of commitment phase, we see a shift from the safe ventral vagal to a tensioned fight or flight state. And this is the exact point when you leave the infatuation phase and start to have feelings of resentment, of rage, anger, and anxiety instead. This also happens in many relationships where you have unsolved problems going on, or when you experience trigger situations. I think it happens in most relationships from time to time, and I think it's completely normal that you get reminded to conflicts in the past and that specific things trigger you. Also, for these situations, it's important to recognize what's actually going on there. But if you have a fear of commitment or relationship anxiety, those things can become chronic, and then you feel chronically resentful towards your partner, or you feel that you're constantly in a state of anger around your partner. And that is when you know that the fight or flight state is active here. In case of dissociation or freezing states, this is usually when you experience shutdown because you may have been too long in this really tension state, or when you feel shame and guilt because you have these sensations, you judge yourself for having these, then you reach the dorsal vagal freeze state of the nervous system. What else can happen there? You feel, as I said, cold, you might feel numb, you feel empty inside, you feel disconnected, and you're not feeling connected, attracted, and full of love. This is what's going on the level of your nervous system while experiencing a fear of commitment or an avoidant attachment reaction. Let's talk about solutions finally. Now, first of all, I want to propose a couple questions to you here. You can ask yourself, in order to find solutions, what are the differences in your behavior when you're alone versus when you're with another person or your partner? What is the energy that you're feeling inside yourself you want to have a break from in a fear of commitment situation? What makes you feel so overwhelmed? What is the ingredient in the salad that your body refuses to commit to for the rest of your life? To understand how a life without fear of commitment could look like, let's have a look at this graphics here that shows how a person with a secure attachment acts within their relationships. Now, we talked about the wounded pathway before. Now we talk about the healthy pathway. So the stimuli that might give you a trigger reaction don't give a trigger reaction to a person who had a healthy childhood. Again, it's a perfect picture of a perfect life where no trauma happened. Most people have some triggers, but just imagine that the triggers that you have at the moment would not trigger you anymore or would not trigger that person. Imagine you have a sensation of grief, someone criticizes you, someone insults you, but it does not trigger you because you haven't had those experiences in the past. You haven't learned that it's bad to have grief. You haven't learned that it's bad to set a boundary when someone insults you. So when you're a healthy individual who feels connected to oneself, you feel safe and regulated. You are in control of your emotional states. Now, when such a situation happens, you can freely decide about how you react to that situation. You can react with humor, with anger, with sadness, with love. You can say, no, I don't like that, clear boundary, or you can say, yes, I like that. What a healthy individual does is she will remain connected in the present. When we see this pathway, one thing I'd like to underline here is the importance of boundaries. And what I see a lot is that people who have experienced complex trauma in their childhood, who have that fear of commitment, are not able to set clear boundaries. So that's definitely a huge thing when it comes to resolving fear of commitment, relationship anxiety. Probably erases most of those symptoms if you were able to set clear boundaries. Most of my life, a boundary was nothing that I would understand. It's just a vague concept. That is probably true for most people who have a fear of commitment, that they're not able to set clear boundaries and therefore constantly create a disconnect. Now, the number one solution, therefore, is setting clear boundaries. Many people with the fear of commitment are more like a transparent net because this is how they learned it as a child. Every emotional reaction from the outside was getting super close to them. You don't have a boundary to the outside. Setting no boundaries guarantees you to live a life full of fear of commitment and self-abandonment. That's 100% guaranteed here. The more we say yes when we mean no, the more we will build up inner tension, and the more emotions we might have to suppress, the more dissociate we will become. It's like a devil's cycle. So you have to learn to set clear boundaries for yourself. And believe me, for the fear of commitment and to resolve those things, it's an absolute game changer. But I also will warn you here, because while setting boundaries, guilt will definitely be arising. Because what will happen to you if you just start to set boundaries? You will feel anxious. You will feel a lot of shame doing that, because now you have to take down that mask. You're in the process of breaking free, and you stop hiding. You say, no, I don't want that, instead of, yeah, okay. Trust the process here. It's definitely a long and hard way if you start that journey, but it's definitely doable and it resolves the symptoms. Another thing I like to warn you about is that if you start this process of setting the boundaries, try to express yourself more, it will make your relationship harder in the short term, but it will definitely lead to freedom in the long term. But I say that to you because if your partner chose you from their own insecure attachment style and wants a people pleaser or a yes sayer, and you stop doing that, you will set clear boundaries, you will express your emotions, then what will happen? Logically, it will create a disgust reaction in them. And it might force them to rethink the whole relationship with you if they chose you because they want someone who can't set clear boundaries. Now, if your partner has their own insecure attachment patterns running, then your adjustments can disturb the whole relationship dynamic. But again, even if that means pain in the short term, it means freedom for both of you in the long term. If you have a partner who loves you for who you truly are, under all this masking, without all this hiding, with setting clear boundaries, with expressing your emotions, then you will both get through together and even grow from it to healthy adults living a secure attached relationship. But if your partner doesn't like that version of you, he or she might leave you. But that's a good thing for you. Yes, it will hurt, definitely. But do you want a person who just takes you because you're a good actor, or you're a person who is a people pleaser because you didn't learn how to set boundaries? I don't think so. Now, some final thoughts from my side. One thing I have learned from my first therapist is, and she emphasized that so many times, that we are able to design our relationships. And I think that's such a beautiful idea here, that especially people with a fear of commitment don't have that many times in their heads. But you can ask yourself, which ideas do you have at the moment about being in a romantic relationship? What does that mean to you? Does a romantic relationship, while you're having a fear of commitment, mean to you that you lose your ability to make clear decisions, that you lose your ability to set clear boundaries? Is it to fulfill the expectations of another person, or is it a lot of work? Then you have it. Your ideas of a relationship are maybe not that favorable, and you might also take away from yourself the ability to design and influence the relationship dynamic. So maybe your image of a relationship is just not as positive as it could be. Because relationships can be easy, they can be really fulfilling, and you can be in a relationship while at the same time feel freedom and do your own thing. You can feel connected, you can set boundaries, you can express emotions. You are the designer of your relationship for the same amount as your partners. You might sometimes have to find compromises. Sometimes you might have to discuss about things. That's totally normal. There is no perfect relationship if you're looking for that, which is constantly harmonious. There is just love involved every day, where it's just pure attraction. That is definitely an illusion. And if you just continue quitting your relationships or not just start dating because you're afraid that you can't be yourself and that you will experience those emotions from the past again within your relationship, then the way is not to find a partner that matches all those perfect criteria and fulfills your illusion of a perfectly harmonious relationship. No, the solution is to break free from those experiences from the past and finally find a better connection to yourself. Now, what do you think about the fear of commitment topic? Are you struggling with symptoms which were, before that episode, unexplainable for you? Definitely let me know in the comments if this episode helped you to better understand your avoidant attachment style. Also, if you want to start your journey in breaking free and re-regulating those dysregulated states and those symptoms of the fear of commitment, definitely check out the free workbook in the description on understandable-podcast.com. If you want to support the podcast, give me a like, leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I wish you all the best. See you in the next episode.